Monsters were wreaking havoc, tearing through everything in their path. Meanwhile, the humans ran for their lives, desperate to escape the chaos. Dungeons and portals began appearing all over the world, unleashing swarms of monsters that threatened humanity. Humans suffered greatly at the hands of these unknown creatures, and some nations have fallen apart. The monsters emitted a toxic magical energy that lingered in the air, slowly seeping into human bodies and poisoning them from the inside out. The poisoned corpse twitches as it lies on the ground, just when they have come to an extinction. A single glimmer of hope broke through. Few of the individuals were awakened, gaining unique talents. Those who have the skills become hunters who fought with monsters. The hunter moves swiftly, skillfully, cutting down the monsters in his path, before landing gracefully in front of a towering beast. The monster roars above, ready to strike the hunter. He launches his sword through the air, aiming precisely for the monster's forehead. The monster hits the ground lifeless and defeated. He then extracted a magic sword out of the defeated monsters, holding his newly acquired swords. He gained the power of the monsters. Just as he thought the battle was over, a gigantic monster appeared. The Cyclops lifted its massive weapon. Ready to strike him down, a devastating blow hurtles towards the hunter. He instantly activates the sword's swift step skill, allowing him to dodge the incoming attack just in time. Another skill from the spider monster was activated, immobilizing the monster with its sticky thread. His grasp burps with burning power. He positioned himself for an attack, unlocking every title he had earned so far. His body surges with burning rage as he lifts his sword, locking eyes with his opponent, wondering what sword it would become. With a burst of power, he delivered his final blow, with a final strike to the ground. The magic swordsman, named Toji, stood tall, bringing the battle to an end. Everything began with a kid once seen as talentless, choosing to stand for his loved ones, surpassing the enemies and ultimately becoming the strongest. He started extracting a new sword from the corpse of the fallen beast, unable to believe it's happening. He stood frozen in front of the dungeon's gate as monsters emerged. Ready to devour him, he recoiled in shock and shouted in fear. He sat down, cupping his forehead as he reflected on the dream. The news flashed. A dungeon gate was reported to have appeared in the 20 district. His eyes lingered on the dangerous gate, pondering the hunters and skilled individuals permitted to approach. He nervously claimed he was busy, triggering her firm response. He smiled as he recalled living life with his sister and being constantly hashed by debt collectors. An image of his parents flashed, smiling as they called his name, and he met them with innocent eyes. Due to their innate kindness, they borrowed money from the lenders for their friend. In the end, their friend betrayed them and disappeared, leaving them struggling, burdened by debt. The collectors pressed for repayment tied to their late parents, urging him to give up his sister to settle the matter. With teary yet glaring eyes, he didn't let go of his sister, feeling tension until now. He couldn't imagine handing her over to them. His sister handed him breakfast, smiling as she mentioned she'd also prepared lunch. He smiled and still believed his parents' words to be kind for no one. But his sister, he muttered an apology as he sat. But her eyes told him she wasn't having it. She looked down, blaming herself for what her brother was going through. He gave her a worried look, gently tapping her shoulder to reassure her. He said goodbye with his lunchbox in hand. Suddenly the kendo, sword on the side, caught his attention. He paused as he reminisced about doing kendo in the past, closing his eyes firmly. He wished to have a talent and be a hunter to fight those monsters. His lips tightened as he disappointedly walked out the door. In the office, a colleague suddenly apologized, making him look at her confused, earning a gratitude from her. Toji's kindness saved his colleagues, making their plans successful. He overheard them say they were afraid to go near the dungeon. The girl added that new ones were likely to form due to its remnants. He listened carefully for more information, but a colleague told the other not to overthink it. He reassured himself. A man suddenly yelled at him, urging him to move faster as he apologized and ran towards the car. As the car sped forward, his colleagues talked about the dungeon's magical energy, turning into an expensive magic stone. They were happily talking about it, Hoping for a raise, he looked at them and gazed out the window, thinking about the valuable magic stones and how they could harm ordinary people. He looked outside, accepting that dirty work is all he has without talent. The driver called out as he saw the head of the magic stone. Upon reaching the location of the dungeon, his colleague ordered Toji to measure the magical energy. He stepped out of the car in full gear, ready for the dangerous tasks ahead. He went close to the magic stone, carefully moving forward. He measured the stone's energy with a device and looked at it, revealing about 1,000 with a surprise grin. His colleague thought of making a fortune out of it. His colleague called him back. He sighs in relief for going back safely. Toji's thoughts echoed, wanting to go back home for Mayu, just as the car was about to move. A heavy darkness settled over the city. The driver was shocked and confused, making him shout in horror. The driver was in disbelief, and Toji became frightened. The dungeon has suddenly opened, emitting a gust of wind, drawing in everything, as the scream of the people echoed. His colleagues gasped in horror as he cried out in utter disbelief. Toji slowly opens his eyes, confused about his whereabouts. With a dark atmosphere, he realized that they were inside the dungeon. His face froze as his colleagues were checking up on one another. The moment he notices the danger, his eyes widen in panic, realizing they're about to be eaten by the monster, urging everyone to get out of the car. Out of the darkness, a group of terrifying monsters appeared, just as they hid among the rocks. The cobble encircled the car. The monsters swarmed the car and tore it apart. Within seconds, they stood frozen in horror, about to run for their lives, running as fast as they can. Toji realized that the monsters cut off their means of escape. Making them stop, they noticed a group of people huddled together, clearly unaware of where the exit might be. He looked at them, realizing they had been swallowed by the gate too. A guy hesitantly asked if anyone had combat skills. He turned his gaze as he remembered having the company gear. Toji offered the headgear to the mother, saying it would help earning her gratitude. As he was about to leave, he smiled back in response. A kobold burst onto the scene with a menacing growl, causing panic as everyone ran for their lives. His gaze landed on the mother and child, calling out his colleagues with combat skills. He barked for them to strike. While he drew its attention, Toji used his equipment, immobilizing the kobold's attack, giving his colleagues a chance to attack the monster. The kobold lets out a terrifying growl as it angrily looms over him, making him unable to move, while his allies remained frozen in fear. He choked out a desperate call to strike the monster. The two glanced at him hesitantly. Their expressions changed, as they recognized he had become the perfect decoy. Toji's eyes widened in disbelief. He gasped out a desperate shout as the two ran away. He clenched his teeth in anger, struggling to stop the monster. He kicked the monster desperately to break free from its grip. As he ran desperately to avoid being caught, he ran in a different direction, to avoid leading the monsters to others. Planning his own escape, his feet felt glued to the ground. Toji stared up at the ogre towering before him. Only then did he realize the goblins had lured him. Straight to the ogre lifted its weapon to attack. Grabbing the weapon, he alarmed the goblin. He readied himself with a stance like Enkindle. A goblin rushed towards him, but he met it with a sword strike. Fueled by determination, he followed up with another blow. Another one lunged from behind and attacked him. Before he could react, he howled in agony. The goblins swarmed him from all sides and attacked mercilessly. His body went limp as he was losing consciousness, the memory of his family childhood. A jolt of hope flickered in his eyes. Behind the towering monster in Godlands was the dungeon's reward. It was a treasure chest made of divine silver. It contains legendary items known as dungeon relics. Only 6 of them have ever been discovered in the world. With all his strength, he got up, running towards the goblins, and fought with them. As the ogre prepared to strike, he hurled the goblin with all his might. Catching the ogre off guard, he slid beneath the distracted ogre. Grabbing the silver chest, he desperately opened the chest, only to find a scroll inside. He looked surprised, thinking it was a worthless paper, leaving him nearly unconscious. The young Toji looked at his smiling parents, telling him to be kind with others. A part of him questioned his kindness, convinced it had only brought him misery. the scroll shining brightly as he called it out. He pleaded with the scroll to respond. A growl came out from the ogre as he frantically reached for the scroll. Each desperate reach came with a fire in his eyes, unaware of the danger behind him, for the sake of his only sister. The ogre roared as he finally gripped the scroll. Just as the monster swung its weapon to strike, a fiery light suddenly engulfed him. The scroll activated, scanning his status and choosing the skill ideal for survival. The magic swordsman skill was activated. The ogre watched with fury. Toji stood in full armor as he unleashed the power he had earned. He looked at himself and was stunned by the new skill. He faced the monsters with unwavering resolve. The skill of creating swords out of defeated monsters was his. From a distance, the kobold launched a direct attack at him. He delivered a solid punch, making the monster instantly die. He then obtained his first ever magic sword. The goblins recoiled in fear. He looked fiercely as he activated the skill. He moved with speed and precision and struck down the monsters instantly. A new set of monsters lurked in the shadows as he drew a new sword from the goblin's remains. With the goblin's sword in hand, a night vision skill activated. The goblin let out a shriek. With a furious look, the ogre attacked him, making him dodge instantly. Toji's sword struck the ogre firmly, surprised by its toughness. The ogre struck again as he raised his swords to block the blow. His swords were damaged, making the system give a warning. He threw it all aside as he no longer needed it. He grabbed the sword, throwing it all one by one, making the ogre distracted, catching it completely off guard. The sword sliced through the thin air. The ogre cried out while the blade pierced deep into its flesh. Toji taunted the ogre as he landed a blow from behind. Its roar echoed as it staggered backward. The monster looks at him frightened. He raises his weapon and strikes from above. Aiming for its eye, he brought down his sword with a final blow. As the ogre fell, a prompt appeared on the ogre's corpse. He looked at it while gasping for breath, generating the magic sword. He watched his hand, trying to grasp the power he had gained. He obtained a skill of strength enhancement. Looking closer and noticed his sword had ranks similar to Hunter's. He looks upward, startled as the dungeon begins to collapse. He quickly began to move forward, and suddenly something caught his attention. Lying on the ground were the corpses of the two collies who had abandoned him. The driver's corpse remained twisted, while the other one struggled greatly. Toji thought it was their karma. He heads toward the dungeon gate, eager to see his sister again. Officials gathered outside the dungeon gate to secure the area and ensure safety. The girl announced that 5 kobolds were approaching just as they emerged from the gate. The hunters moved swiftly to slash through them. The man alerted the specific hunters for incoming slimes. The hunters tense as monsters poured from the gate, realizing the boss was gone, and control had shifted. Yuji, from the Hunter Association, told the hunters to stay calm and take control. If things broke down, he would rely on Marie. A silhouette appeared behind the hunters. Her eyes narrowed as she recalled the dungeon clearing process. The first step is to eliminate the small fry monsters, then take down the boss if the step isn't followed. The remaining monsters will try to escape the dungeon. Her face dimmed by the thought of failing hunters. Yuji firmly states that the hunter responsible will be taken. The delay in self-defense force sparks his frustration. The magic stone grows rapidly as the gate glows brightly. He then announced that a huge monster was coming. Suspecting it was the boss, he ordered the hunters to prepare themselves. The hunters then took a battle stance with weapons in hand. Marie glared sharply, ready to draw her blade. Someone stepped out of the gate. Toji came out with a confused look. He looked at the people waiting outside. It was then he realized that they were hunters. He stares ahead as he thought they were planning to go inside. His gaze landed on the mother and child. A sense of relief washes over him. Yuji ordered the hunters to surround Toji. He grew increasingly alarmed as they slowly surrounded him. He was struck with confusion as the hunters suddenly rushed in. The team stared at the screen in growing confusion. Yuji asked the staff about its magic power level. He could hardly believe it when he found out it exceeded 10,000. The hunters were bewildered due to its overwhelming energy. Yuji tensed and began sweating as he realized how bad the situation was. Toji didn't notice until it was too late. He was mistakenly thought to be a monster. As he stood there in panic, alarmed by the overwhelming surge of his magical energy, he finally realized how dangerous he was. The hunters pressed forward, leaving him standing in inner conflict. Unsure of what to do, he faced the eager hunters, knowing any plea would be useless. He was horrified, thinking his death would leave me alone. Toji was torn in desperation and doubt. He was startled by the notification, and the system urged him to deactivate him with his skills. He stood puzzled and uncertain. The system then added the information he needed. Understanding what the system was trying to say, he confidently decided to escape and deactivate his skill. He took a step, making Marie feel alarmed. Without hesitation, she rushed forward and struck first with her sword. Toji bolted through the towering building. Leaving Marie stunned, she was eager not to let him escape. She fled quickly before him, causing Toji to feel startled and off guard. Raising her sword, she activated her skill and struck him with all her might, which made him dodge quickly. He looked frightened at the damaged concrete. His eyes met hers as he was reminded of the skill, realizing it was the sword master named Marie. He then activated his skill to flee the scene. He ran through the falling debris. Leaving Marie behind, he landed on a larger piece, forcefully kicking it back. Marie braces herself as debris falls rapidly toward her. She was amazed by Toji's move, and yet she sliced it through the air, causing the debris to break apart into smaller pieces as it fell. Yuji was amazed as he looked up from the ground. Marie landed on the ground. She glanced around puzzled as the magical presence disappeared. She clenched her teeth in frustration as she lost Toji. Her expression hardened as she was driven by the resolve to settle it. In the dark alley, Toji was hardly standing with a lot of bruises. The system popped up, making him submit to it in pain. Me spun around startled. She gasped in horror as she looked down. She shouted in fear as she saw her brother lying on the ground. Covered in bruises, the tub was filled with his dirty clothes. He recalled how worried Me was. He lied that there was an accident at work. He clenches his jaw, having thought of his injuries. His injuries healed instantly. As he looked at his body, he started brushing off his clothes to get rid of the evidence. May entered the bathroom and called him, which made him startled. He turned at her, thinking if she found out. She suddenly sat down, asking, "When did he get muscular?" He looked at his muscular body in confusion over the transformation. May noticed her brother's glow up and assuming a growth spurt. He then agreed awkwardly. He clenches his fist, thinking it was because of the skill. He felt grateful for the skill that made being with Me possible again. They were taken aback by a sudden call at the door. He then recognized the voice belonged to the debt collectors. Loud bangs from the door kept coming as they stood. He instructed Maeve to hide in the back, in which she agreed. He opened the door. Mr. Saku appeared before him with a wide grin on his face. Toji asked his reason for visiting. He smirked as he suggested talking outside. He then reconsidered and pointed inside. Toji clenched his teeth as he agreed to talk somewhere else. In a dark neighborhood, he received a sudden punch on the face. He landed on the ground as Saku prepared to return the favor. He pointed out that trash breeds trash. He wore a twisted smile as he prepared to stomp Toji's head. For fleeing debt, he groaned in pain as the foot struck his head. He was shakingly getting up as he told Saku that he had no money. Saku then threatened his life and his sister's future. They laughed as they recalled having a lot of clients for his sister to pay off the debt. Toji glared fiercely upon hearing they will lay a hand on Mayu. Saku affirmed with a provoking stare. Though the world was destroyed by monsters, he cared only for money as he kicked Toji. They laughed as he was covered with a lot of bruises. Toji rose to his feet unexpectedly, which caught them off guard. He angrily faced them and said he would show something. Money can't settle. Saku clenched his teeth in utter disbelief. He furiously ordered his men to teach him a lesson. The man fiercely swung his sword towards Toji. Toji's fiery aura flared as he caught the blade in his hand, causing the man to freeze. He bitterly thanked them for ruining his life. He lifted the end of the blade, which frightened the man as he added Muse to. He changed his demeanor and activated his skill to make them pay for what they did. The system gave him a warning to only use his skill quickly. He firmly responds with affirmation. not letting the collector survive until the next day. The men stood frozen in disbelief. The guy was about to speak more when Toji cupped his mouth. He glared and ordered the guy not to make a sound. The guy pleaded with him to stop. Toji suddenly brought him crashing down to the ground. Without warning, the other one was in shock. As he activated his skill, he moved fast and cleanly cut through the man. His eyes burned with a menacing glare. Sokka was frightened while pulling out the gun. He pulled the trigger continuously. Toji then used his swords to dodge the bullet. Panic and disbelief flashed across Sokka's face. Toji advanced slowly while the man desperately begged him to stop. His face dimmed as he stood tall, and Sokka screamed in pure terror. Fear held the old man still as he begged for his family. While Toji advanced firmly, Sokka pleaded for him to stop. But he struck him down, leaving him with no chance of talking. The system showed up as he stood looking at the corpses. Upon confirmation, it searched for a title and assigned him the brutal. He looks down with a dim expression. He paused while contemplating the buff the title had given him. He wonders if defeating them triggered the title. He looks down to the corpses, saying that the brutal title suited them more than him. May was sitting worriedly as he heard his brother. She ran towards him asking if he was okay. He gave her a reassuring smile. She watched him with relief in her eyes and hugged his brother tightly. He closed his eyes as he swore to protect his only sister. He lowered his gaze and chose not to tell the sister about the skill. May looked at him in confusion. The two did not let go as they shared a heartfelt embrace. The news reported that 3 corpses were found, and it was suspected a monster attacked them. May recognizes that the corpses were found near their town. Toji felt relieved when last night's incident was blamed on monsters. His demeanor was shown in the television as the first numbers. Monster in Japan. His eyes widened as he realized they had mistaken him for a monster, classifying him in numbers. A man reported that number is a category of most dangerous monsters. It includes the 9 that brought down the Australian continent and 13 in the Arctic. The broadcast continued with a warning that made Toji realize he was being hunted. He called out to him with a frightened expression. He then gave her a pat of assurance. He met her eyes and promised to protect her no matter what. Me smiled in reassurance. She then teased her as he said something cool. He answered with a change of heart. He heads out with a smile as she waves her goodbye warmly. The old man looked at the resignation letter. Toji gave his gratitude as he was about to head out, but the old man stopped him. He moved forward, driven by the hope of a new life. His feet landed on the gigantic building of Hunters Association, determined to live as a hunter. He went to the lobby to register as a hunter for a better life. In Miyosake, he faced the assistant with sharp confidence. She blushed and was too stunned to respond. He was confused and asked if something was on his face. The girl awkwardly replied and asked him to come for the registration. They entered the room to check his qualifications for becoming a hunter. He lied down a bed as they checked up on his skills. The physician told him he indeed has a skill. While looking at the monitor, they were in awe when his assessment revealed a unique skill. The physician explained that his skill is at an old level. His mind raced as he contemplated his skill that could only be activated by magic. The physician asked him to activate his skill, which made him feel alarmed. His eyes widened in panic, as his magic would leak out if he activated it. He awkwardly smiled, making the physician apologize. She immediately explained that some skills are hard to explain, and Toji embarrassedly affirmed. She then told him to wait for an hour for his license. He sighed in relief as he walked out of the room. He moved forward, pondering if other hunters had skills as sensitive as his. He paused when someone called his name. His gaze became sharp and worried, recognizing that they were his bullies from school. Toji gently removed Fuda's hand and urgently asked him to stop. Fuda became annoyed by his attitude. The 2 hunters acted arrogantly and pointed out that Toji's odd was weak. Without warning, they suddenly surrounded him from all sides. His gaze went sharp as he told them to leave him alone. Fuda grinned in satisfaction as he urged him to apologize. Like he used to, Toji shot him a cold glare. Making him feel annoyed, Fuda shouted in fury as he charged forward, with anger blazing in his eyes. Toji swiftly dodges and grabs Fuda's hand, which takes him by surprise, tossed him aside, and made him crash into the other hunter, knocking them both off balance. The system recommended him to target the critical areas. In which he refused, the system disabled itself. As Toji walked towards the struggling Fuda and his comrade, he furiously slammed his foot on Fuda's head and made him wince in pain. He looked down and urged him to admit his mistake and apologize to him. He becomes alarmed and lunges his hand forward. He violently grabbed their neck with a crushing grip. He rushed forward, carrying them by the neck. He pinned them against the wall with overwhelming force, causing them to drop their guns. They struggled to breathe while questioning his overwhelming strength without activating his skill. Toji's gaze locked as he felt good to crush them. He held them still and did not want to let go, as he drove them into the depths of terror. Fuda recovered and told Toji he was acting almighty, which caught Toji's attention. He let go of the hunters and said Fuda was the one acting almighty. Fuda grinned as he prepared himself. He activated his skill to arrogantly show Toji their rank difference. Toji narrowed his eyes in disbelief. Fuda carelessly unleashed his scorching flames, making Toji quickly raise his hand. Fuda's skill surged relentlessly toward him, which made him feel alarmed. He clenched his teeth in disbelief that Fuda used a skill inside the Hunters Association. The system gave him a warning that made him consider taking him down immediately, despite struggling to breathe. The two hunters tried to stop Fuda because of his skill's range. Fuda arrogantly told them he would narrow the range, and told them to just watch. He halted abruptly when someone suddenly noticed him. The staff firmly forbade skill use inside the association, and demanded to see his license. Toji's bullies ran in frustration, trying to escape the staff. Yuji asked him if he was all right, and suddenly he smiled delightfully as he recognized Toji. Toji was flabbergasted when he realized it was him. Yuji grabbed the coffee while recounting what happened. They sat across from each other, as Toji thanked his best friend for stepping in, making him burn his mouth. Toji laughed as he noticed that he still can't handle hot things. Yuji smiled and said Toji could handle it now that he's a hunter. Toji sipped his coffee and admitted his case was complicated. Yuji laughed as he became a staff and not a hunter, then asked Toji when his skill manifested. He told him it was recent. He then asked him if there is an item to obtain a skill, aside from awakening. Yuji ponders aloud as he has never encountered it before. He then added that it must be a legendary item if it happened. Toji looked down as he acknowledged it. A step hits the ground. It was Toji standing before a solo dungeon. Toji stood as he was eager to learn more about his skill. He checked the dungeon rank and saw that it was an F rank, beginner-friendly dungeon. He finally entered the dungeon after confirming that no one was inside. He landed inside the dungeon. The system asked if he wanted to acquire a skill bonus, as he asked for the conditions. All the conditions popped up. He stood tall as he noticed that he had met all of it. He realized that the skill had a lot of hidden features, making him accept the bonus skill. The training dungeon skill had been unlocked. He looked shocked as he realized that it's not something he expected. The once blue dungeon turned into a fiery. A loud noise caught his attention. A wolf-like gigantic monster was growling before him. He was surprised when he saw a boss-level monster. The gigantic monster rushed forward ready to launch an attack, with its claws raised. He activated his skill as he welcomed the monster. A powerful kick struck the monster's jaw and drove it backward. With great force, he pulled out his sword with incredible speed. He unleashed his ultimate attack and struck the monster. He easily cut through its thick neck, due to the brutal title Powerful buff. The system asked him if he would like to create a sword. Out of high cobalt, he then pressed the create button. A 2-star magic sword landed on his hand, giving him a leadership skill to control the other cobalt. The system asked him if he would like it stored. The item box opened and allowed him to choose an empty slot. He was flabbergasted as the sword disappeared. He tried to press it again. The sword landed in his hand, which made it easy for him to store up to 25 swords. He was alarmed by the sound, and a group of monsters showed up. He instantly slashed through the monsters, with the thought of extracting them into new swords. The monsters were tougher than the high cobalt. Using brutal skill was the only way to strike their core. He had gathered multiple swords from the monsters, and decided to store it in the item box. The system has detected an identical sword, allowing him to upgrade it. The werewolf's sword upgraded into 2 stars. He wondered if it had become stronger. And its usefulness. His sword became fancier as he decided to upgrade the others. He stood before an enormous door covered in strange markings. He checked the sword he had gathered in inventory. He had obtained 1 viscous, 3 werewolf, and 5 goblin swords. His eyes glowed, thinking the tough boss was perfect for his new swords and skills. He opened the door of the room and awaited his next opponent. A shadowy figure of a knight slowly emerged from the darkness of the room. Toji was greeted by a majestic throne, where a lone knight sat with quiet authority. The knight descends from his throne. The holy knight of white light stood with a commanding presence. They stood across from each other. As Toji found it amusing how opposite they were. The system said defeating the knight would grant a reward, as he believed was a skill bonus. Energy swirled as the knight unleashes his sword. Without any warning, the knight charges forward with overwhelming force. Just as the sword was about to strike him, he quickly activated his skill. He lured the knight with swift moves and aiming a single blow. Powered by his brutal buff, with swift precision, he rushed forward, targeting the knight's neck in a decisive strike. The knight quickly turned around. Toji was surprised when the knight saw through him and effortlessly dodged his attack. The knight's gaze sharpened. A searing beam of energy erupted from the knight's blade. With precise force, the attack cut through the air, heading directly for Toji. The impact sent him crashing into the wall, and his sword was destroyed. He was shocked. When the system warned that the knight's skill targets demonic nature, he looks at the approaching knight, realizing it has a skill making it a unique numbered monster. His gaze burned as he decided not to hold back anymore. He swung his viscous sword forward, extending its blade towards the knight. With sharp reflexes, the knight avoided the attack. Toji followed it by rushing multiple swords toward the knight. The knight stood unfazed, as its armor effortlessly deflected the attack. He was filled with frustration due to failure. A goblin sword suddenly struck the gap in the knight's armor. Toji rushed forward knowing the gaps were thin, but the neck was still the best target. He was troubled by the increase of the knight's defense. The system gave him a recommendation to use leadership skill. A sudden realization lit up in his eyes. Toji stood firm, facing the knight. He struck this sword to the ground. He activated the leadership, and a group of kobolds emerged through the ground. He ordered the kobolds to attack. Toji took the time and activated Swift Step to rush forward the knight. With a piercing glare, the knight handled the assault with ease, turning the kobolds into minced meat. Toji lunged through the back, as the kobolds gave him enough for an opening. He summoned the great ogre's magic sword and activated its skill. Toji surges with crimson energy as he raises his blade high, preparing to unleash a devastating strike. His eyes blaze with fury, going for a head-to-head battle. The knight gave him an intense look. In response, he struck with his sword forward. As the knight countered the attack, a surge of energy erupts as their blades clashed. The system gave a warning, but Toji brushed it off. He was eager to trade the great ogre's sword in exchange for the knight's head. Then cracks began to spread across their blades. The impact of their clash reduced both blades to flying shards. Toji summons the werewolf's magic sword. His eyes burned with intensity as he swung his sword towards the knight. The knight's head was decapitated. He looked down to the enemy's body on the ground. The system prompted him to create a sword just as he raised his hand. The moment he saw the 4-star sword of white light, he was filled with astonishment. A chest suddenly emerged, which surprised him. The system rewarded him and restored his health, followed by the acquisition of the new title. He obtained the title of High-Speed Expert. Toji can now increase his movement speed at will. He noticed that the titles were based on his fighting styles. He then opened the chest reward, acquiring an enhancement item called the Stone of Ascension. The stone can increase the sword's rank by 2 levels. Toji considered it as a valuable item due to the rarity of his swords. The dungeon gate showed up as Toji found its way back. His eyes glared with focus as he prepared to complete the dungeon. Yuji turned around with a surprised expression as someone called his name. He was stunned as he realized that it was Toji. Toji smiled and waved at him. Yuji asked him if he was done already. He didn't expect him to finish the solo dungeon so soon, but Toji wasted no time asking for his reward. Yuji then told him to wait. As he checked the monitor, the dungeon's reaction vanished, and he was surprised. Toji finished it in hours. He told him that he transferred the reward, in which Toji replied in gratitude. Toji was surprised by the amount of reward an F-ranked dungeon had. Yuji explained solo runs give full rewards, but parties must split them, in which he affirmed he asked if he was going home. But Toji said he'd dive back into the dungeon this afternoon. He was in disbelief and surprised by Toji's stamina. Toji then told him that it was his skill. He took it back and told him that the dungeon mutated and restored his stamina. Yuji replied and told him that he won't mention it. Toji smiled and showed him that he was okay. As he asked for the dungeon's list, Yuji gave him the list, but didn't recommend clearing dungeons back to back. Toji looked at the dungeon carefully. It was a red gate dungeon with some herbs. Yuji told him that it was a medicinal herb, which likely yields healing items. As a reward, he added that he might have found a high elixir panacea. Toji fell into a deep thought upon hearing it, as he asked her with a worrying tone. Mayu apologized for causing trouble because of her health. He looked down as he remembered Mayu's declining health due to magic. He could heal Mio's body if only he had the elixir. Yuji told him how expensive and rare the elixir was. He called Yuji as he was determined to enter the dungeon immediately. Yuji was stunned. He told him that he couldn't enter the dungeon until tomorrow. Toji replied in confusion. Yuji told him that it was dangerous, and they are forming a group to avoid breakouts. They call it a raid dungeon, and they require at least 5 members. Toji was tense as he wouldn't be able to take it solo. Yuji then gave him some good news. He told him that he'll make a temporary party for tomorrow, as he thought of Yuji's reaction earlier. He walks away with hands in his pocket while humming softly, below the dangerous red dungeon gate. A group of officials were gathered to prepare what lay beyond. Toji looked around, as he recalled that they will meet the temporary party on site. A lot of hunters were gathered around the area for the dungeon. He halted at the sound of a sudden voice. The group approaches as the leader addresses Toji directly. Toji shook Kuga's hand and asked if they were introduced by Yuji, in which he affirmed Kuga was delighted as Toji joined his team. He then asked Toji what weapon he was using. Toji showed a knife in his hand. Kuga asked if he had close combat skills, since he wasn't carrying a gun. Toji told him that one sword is enough. He then remembered that anti-monster guns are expensive. Kuga smiled at him as he was confident in his abilities. They all looked in front as the dungeon gate was about to open. The hunters rushed forward after receiving confirmation, while Kuga LED'd them the way. Hunters kept coming inside the dungeon. The first group looked around, carefully holding their weapons, rushed forward and started attacking the small fry monsters. Toji's group watched at the back as the hunters fought with monsters. He looked at them thinking that they had limited odd and bullets. The goblins pounced on him and attacked him mercilessly, making him crash to the ground. He rolled over and rushed forward. With a single swift motion, the goblins were completely annihilated. The goblins' corpses fell to the ground as he smiled. Looking at his weapon, he is only a me blade, and decided to activate his skill when he reaches his limit. Kuga applauded as he didn't expect Toji to make it. Toji asked him with a smile if he had passed. Kuga affirmed and guided them further inside the dungeon. A faint smile curled on his lips. As he concealed something up his sleeve, he looked at Toji with a twisted smile as he bore sadistic amusement. Toji was determined to get the high elixir for Mio's sake. He ran in a hurry to get ahead of other hunters. Kuga called out to him and told him to take it slow, which made Toji stop. He told them with a grin that rushing ahead would drain their stamina. Halfway, he instructed them to conserve their energy and increase their pace. Midway, Toji noted that small fry left for others to clean up. He thought of making swords from small fry, but had to keep his skill hidden. He smiled with calm resolve, ready to follow the leader. Cougar replied in gratitude with smug delight. Cougar believed Toji was easy to manipulate. 2 figures stand in silence, as moonlight filters through the shadows of a quiet building. His words trailed off in disbelief that his D quick was taken down. The man remained seated and stern while Cougar knelt, delivering grim news. He reported that Saki and others were taken down by Toji. The man looked down, as he told Kuga not to let their reputation tarnish. Uneasy but determined, Kuga set his mind on erasing Toji. The man then told him to make sure that Toji will pay the price. He was cut off by the loud growl of the white wolf. His expression became even darker. He grabbed the wolf's head and crushed the wolf's head with his bare hands. His eyes blazed with fury as he warned Kuga not to disappoint him. Kuga looked down, as he knew that anyone who disobeyed the god was left unalive. His eyes narrowed as he observed Toji's moves. The small fry monsters kept getting annihilated by Toji, using only his knife. Toji stood tall, without knowing someone was watching him. Kuga recalled the corpses and recognized the weapon used by Toji. He then noticed something off as he looked at Toji's demeanor. A faint crease forms between his brows as he tries to figure Toji out. His comrade consulted him for their plan, in which he affirmed. Kuga called him out while waving his hand, as he told him that they can go all out. Toji smiled as they were about to head to the boss room. He fast-forwarded and caught up with them in front of the boss room. He looked in front as they were the first to reach the boss room. Kuga asked him if he was ready. He signals his resolve with a smirk. Two of his comrades moved ahead and pushed the door open. Without hesitation, the torches suddenly lit the whole place up. Tension snapped like a wire when they saw the boss. Toji looked around calmly while Kuga checked up on him. A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his lips as he glanced at Toji. A towering figure exudes an overwhelming pressure that crept upon them. The monster's burning gaze pierced through them. Fear rooted them in place. As the towering monster stepped into the firelight, the gargoyle took flight with its wings and glared at them, while gripping a hammer as they looked up. The system gave Toji a warning as he stared at the creature above. Mockery filled Kuga's eyes as he planned to drain Toji's mana and finish him off. Toji positioned himself with his knights, since he couldn't use his skill around others. The gargoyle lifted its hammer over its head and was about to launch an attack on them. The glint in the hunter's eyes mirrored as he used a reflection skill. The gargoyle's attack was deflected by the hunter, who stood firm against the blow. The other hunters seized the chance to shoot the monster. Their attacks didn't have any effect on the gargoyle. Kuga gritted his teeth and unleashed his skill. The gargoyle looked down as its foot froze in place. Kuga signaled Toji as he rushed toward the monster to launch a powerful strike. The gargoyle notices his presence and prepares to launch a powerful attack towards him. Panic surges through him as he knows he won't be able to dodge it completely. He activated his title as he bent over. The gargoyle unleashes a torrent of searing light, forcing Toji to twist midair to avoid the attack. His title saved him by inches as he landed on the ground. The titles can function to some extent without activating the skill. The gargoyle emitted a golden aura, causing the ice on its feet to melt. Kuga stared in disbelief as he realized the monster melted his ice with its body heat. The gargoyle looms overhead with a heavy presence, leaving them to the ground. It hovered at a distance and compelled them to look up in alarm. Toji stepped forward and activated his title as he told them to leave it to him. He quickly moved from pillar to pillar, keeping his eyes on his target. He dashes around at incredible speed, causing the gargoyle to growl in fury. His teammates look up in disbelief as the unexpected unfolds before their eyes. He shouted for support while quickly glancing over his teammates. Kuga understood the situation and quickly summoned multiple ice blades. The hunters launched their strikes in perfect unison as they target the gargoyle above. Its eyes flared with rage due to the attacks. The gargoyle growls in pain, losing its balance from the relentless attacks. It slams into the ground, creating a thud. Toji waited for the right moment and then descended with deadly intent toward the monster. He activated a skill before bringing his strength down on the gargoyle. In a fierce strike, he landed on one knee, just as the gargoyle's hand came crashing down before him. The gargoyle activated his skill and lifted its hammer with rage. His eyes widened as the system gave him a warning about gargoyle's skill. The gargoyle struck his hammer, channeling the skill king of destruction. Debris was flying due to the attack, as Toji was fortunate enough to dodge it. The gargoyle's hammer broke the ground as it landed. Toji curses under his breath as he realizes that it was a deadly strike. The system warned him of his skill's magic consumption. Making him more tense, his gaze landed on Kuga, who replied the ice sword contained no ice-based skill. He urged Kuga to trust him, making him hesitantly agree. Kuga ordered everyone to support Toji as they prepared their skills for an attack. The gargoyle once again received a shower of attacks from the hunters. Having grasped the situation, Toji decided to throw his knife towards the gargoyle. He threw it with full force. As the gargoyle didn't waver, the monster accepted the knife, and Toji realized the truth. He grabbed the ice swords, as he revealed that its weakness is the ice blade. He slashed through it, making the gargoyle growl. As the weak spot had been revealed, he rushed forward holding the ice blade. He dives from above, aiming straight for the gargoyle's weak spot. The ice blade starts melting, causing Kuga to shout and panic, as the ice blade won't be able to handle it. The gargoyle raised its hammer once again as it prepared to strike. Toji was so eager to finish the monster, maximizing the buffs he receives from his titles. Toji aims a decisive blow at the monster's core. A burst of lighter UPS as his strike hits the gargoyle's weak spot. The gargoyle was fatally struck as it began to fall. It landed lifelessly on the ground with a dull thud. The hunters watched the aftermath in relief as it ended. Toji stood on the gargoyle's corpse as the system declared its defeat. A glowing light distracted him from thoughts of being a hunter. Without activating his skill, it was the completion chest reward. The group approaches him proudly as they give him the credit. Toji humbly told them that it was everyone's effort that made them win. Kuga smiled and said the victory was Toji's, and the group would give him the chest reward. Toji was delighted as he gladly accepted it. Kuga's smile twisted. They brought out the gun and aimed it at Toji's head. The trigger was pulled continuously. Blood splattered around. Toji was lucky to dodge the bullet and come away with only a scratch. Kuga gritted his teeth as he held the gun. His expression suddenly dimmed. Toji looks shocked, knowing he would have died without his skill assist. Toji utters Kuga's name as he becomes confused and demands an explanation. Kuga smirks while asking the obvious. His twisted joy is clear as he seals Toji's fate with a gun. They showered him with bullets while he faced the ground. Toji cussed in frustration as he used his buff to get out of the situation. He was about to move when a bullet hit the ground, leaving him startled while looking down. He then noticed that these guys were able to predict his moves. Kuga admired Toji's speed, yet reminded him that they were not weak to be intimidated. A flicker of rage sparked in Toji's eyes. The hunters once again showered him with bullets as he ran and cursed under his breath. He leapt onto the gargoyle's corpse. Using it as a shield, he looked back, wondering why Kuga risked punishment for killing a comrade. That grin revealed the truth he had been hiding. Kuga smirks, while reiterating that a dead body in the boss room isn't unusual. Toji then realized that they had been planning this all along. They stood at the other side of the corpse, while Kuga narrated his plans regarding Toji's death. Toji's eyes narrowed as sweat trailed down his cheek. He stayed hidden behind the corpse, while he asked Kuga for his intent. Kuga reloaded the gun with a smirk, saying it began with Toji killing the debt collector. Toji became alarmed after hearing those. Kuga readied his gun and told Toji that he sealed his fate by defying the Six Fong Association. A subtle knowing smile forms on Toji's lips. His face darkened as energy swirled, realizing they were the debt collector's backup. The system notified that his magic power had replenished and prompted him to eliminate threats. Toji's demeanor didn't change as things shifted. Kuga's smug grin was visible, as he expected Toji's energy to be depleted. Toji remained unfazed by the deadly aim locked on him. He remained still and unreadable. Crimson-red liquid splattered around. The hunter's eye widened as he didn't expect the sudden attack. Toji spoke with relief as he had thought his skill was the problem. He then freed his hand with a menacing look. Covered in red stain, he showed no remorse in taking revenge. The second hunter went mad. He fired his gun continuously as he blamed Toji. Toji came forward with such overwhelming speed that the second hunter was left confused. The second hunter's voice cracks as panic begins to sink in. Toji was even more serious about his intent. He darted forward without hesitation, driven by instinct. The second hunter went in panic and activated his skill. Toji moved fast and appeared behind him. Driving the knife deep Kuga's face went alarmed as he watched him. Toji sharply told the second hunter. He had already seen the skill and knew its weakness. He let go of the lifeless hunter as it fell to the ground with one strike. Another step forward, telling Toji not to get cocky, as iron balls floated in his hand. He unleashed a precise wave of iron balls. Toji then evaded everything in a split second. The third hunter was shocked, yet he expected it to happen. With a deliberate motion, he lifted his hand, and the iron balls came forth, his defense fully formed. As he stared at the gargoyle's corpse and urged Toji to confront him, Toji grabbed the gargoyle's weapon. He lifted it and dove forward. The third hunter's face went pale as he stuttered in terror. Toji smashed the hammer onto the third hunter's position, leaving no trace of him behind. He stood tall, having ended the lives of those worthless lackeys. He glanced at Kuga, wanted to hear him out. Kuga replied with a mocking laugh. Telling him he was naive, he rolled up his sleeve to reveal a tattoo. Toji recognized the Four Fangs tattoo. Kuga's hand reached up as he summoned an ice crystal. The ice crystal grew larger and larger as he faced Toji with unwavering focus. He smiled with arrogance, telling him not to waste his time. Toji stared silently, knowing this guy was on another level. With deadly intent, Kuga launched an attack. The ice crystal surged downward rapidly, aiming to strike Toji down. Toji instantly dodged the crystal as it pierced to the ground. Kuga, with a twisted smile, touched the ground as energy flowed through his hand. A powerful surge of energy flowed through his hand as ice rapidly spread across the ground, forcing Toji to leap out of harm's way. He darted out twice as deadly shards of ice erupted in his path. He then prepared his legs and jumped out of the ground as high as he could. The empty ground was now filled with ice spikes. Toji pierced his knife through the wall, using it to support his weight. As he asked Kuga about his ability, Kuga laughed at Toji as he mocked him for being an amateur. Toji looked down as he listened. Understanding one's own power will make them versatile in using it. Kuga raised his hand and said he could control the ice itself, and not just the ice blade. He then flickered his hand. Hands made of ice suddenly rushed toward Toji and caught him off guard. His grip loosened on his knife as he tried to avoid the icy hands. The icy hands pursued him relentlessly. As he was falling midair, Kuga prepared his ice blades, as he was certain that Toji would struggle. A surge of razor-sharp ice blades tore through the air toward Toji. Kuga praised Toji with a cocky smile. Toji's expression dimmed as if he was waiting for the right time. A big wave of red energy suddenly engulfed Toji as it swirls around him with fierce intensity. Kuga went uneasy by what he had seen. Without warning, a sudden explosion tore through the silence, sending shock waves rippling through the air as Kuga used his hand for protection. A large cloud of crimson smoke filled the room, leaving Kuga confused. A terrifying aura crept into his whole being. He paused in horror, as the magical power he felt surpassed even that of the dungeon boss. He looked at himself as he noticed that he was shaking in fear. A silhouette appeared through the smoke before him. Toji emerged covered in armor, bathed in fiery red magic. Kuga's eyes widened in horror as he recognized that it was numbers 101. Toji sighed as he ended up using his skill. He stared with fiery eyes, as anyone who saw him in this form was doomed to die. Kuga's sweat was all over his face, as couldn't believe that it was Toji. His face turned horror when he realized it. They stood across in the distance. As Kuga noted the number appeared the same day, Saki died, preparing to answer. His eyes burned in rage while he emitted a powerful magic, causing Kuga to wince in pain. Kuga landed on his knee when he felt Toji's powerful magic. Toji's expression darkened as his magic kept expanding, suffocating Kuga to the ground. Kuga clenched his teeth and tried to stay upright against the force. His crimson power flared at his command. He raised his hand, causing Kuga to look at it with fear. The very thought of kneeling ignited rage in Kuga's eyes. His fury erupted as he raised his voice and hand in defiance. A large ice crystal appeared before them. Kuga held his allegiance with feral pride. Toji was surprised by Kuga's toughness. Toji's blow broke the ice crystal into shards, with his magic sword in hand. He stood and mocked Kuga's effort. He then prepared himself to strike once more. His foot crashed down on Kuga's stomach and drove the air from his lungs. With a single and powerful kick, he sent Kuga hurtling through the air like a rag doll. Kuga was terribly trembling as he landed on the ground. He raised his hand and summoned a thick ice wall while planning to retreat. Toji was impressed by the ice wall standing before him. He then struck the wall with his sword. It only left a scratch as he realized that it was thick enough. Kuga was clawing to the ground and convincing himself that he's not running away. Toji generated a sword out of the gargoyle's corpse, obtaining and wielding the warhammer weapon on his hand. Panic gripped Kuga tighter as he heard Toji's voice. Toji's silent stare burned louder than any threat. He wielded his new acquired weapon, ready to deliver strike. The thick ice wall collapsed into shards, unveiling Kuga's figure. Toji walks toward the pleading Kuga while gripping his weapon. Kuga was now crying and trembling in fear. Toji once again raised his weapon with fiery rage, making Kuga plead and cry for his life. He charged without hesitation and smashed his head. The system popped up offering him a new title. Toji accepted without hesitation. Then the system searched for an appropriate title he'd acquired, the title of a Slayer. He stood as he received an enhanced ability in PvP combat. His gaze landed on what's in front, hoping to finally save Mio. It was his only hope, the chest reward. Toji looked firmly at the reward chest, while his thoughts were consumed by the elixir. He slowly opened the lid and bright light escaped. His eyes widened in disbelief. His expression turned into confusion. He looked at the whip on his hand, realizing that the reward wasn't the elixir. It was a whip that can control weaker enemies. Toji was eyeing the whip since it was going to be useful. He was alarmed when the dungeon started collapsing. He took a glance at Kuga's corpse and turned to him. Bidding his goodbye, he then ran to the exit of the room. The dungeon started shrinking outside. All the hunters who participated in the raid were exhausted and dismayed. Toji jumped out of the dungeon gate. He looked around, realizing that the raid became chaotic. Few hunters told them to stand back as the dungeon started closing. They watched the dungeon while expecting that monsters would appear. Small fry monsters started escaping through the dungeon. Hunters were quick to annihilate some of them. 2 kobolds were heading towards the injured hunters. Fear was written on their faces. As Toji let out a sigh, he grabbed the sword, striking the kobolds in a split of seconds and landed with grace. He tossed the sword and left the injured hunters behind. Now that the dungeon has closed, the barricade will be lifted. The hunters were delighted to claim their rewards from the guild, while Toji sighed in relief. Hunters were now gathered outside the guild to claim their rewards. Toji stood in the back and learned that all participating hunters would be rewarded. Yuji arrived claiming that reward selection could cause conflict. He smiled while giving credits to the other hunters. Yuji was relieved Toji returned safely. As they shared coffee, Toji was about to drink his coffee when Yuji asked about the dungeon raid. He looked down as he remembered Kuga. He then said it was tough after getting separated from his team. Yuji was wondering about the safety of Kuga's team. He leaned forward as he told Toji that Kuga was B rank. He smiled and assured Toji he wouldn't pair him with inexperienced hunter. Toji was tensed upon realizing that his strength already surpasses the B rank. Yuji was a cheerful smile as he asked him for further concerns. Toji asked calmly if Yuji knows some good places to move. Yuji was taken aback by the question. Mei greeted his brother with a warm smile. Toji entered their home as Mei told him that the dinner was ready. They sat at the dinner table when Mei raised his question about moving. Toji smiled warmly and told Mei it was safer to move to a more secure place. He suddenly became anxious when recalled what Kuga said. He smiled softly and expressed his gratitude. Toji started eating while remembering how glad he was for Yuji. Mei suddenly asked him if he can handle the cost. He told her not to worry because the new job pays well. He took a bite as he decided to raid more dungeons to cover the cost of living. The goblins raised their crude weapons, and their eyes gleamed with hostility as they closed the distance to Toji. They rushed forward to attack him, but they were instantly decapitated by Toji as he unleashed his skill. A gigantic foot moves towards him. The boss of the dungeon appeared as stood before Toji while grinning. The monster slammed its weapon into him. He rose up while holding his two swords, ready to retaliate against the boss. The monster's head was thrown away by the impact of his attack. He stood from a distance as he successfully defeated the dungeon boss. He then went to the next dungeon, facing an enormous serpent. He didn't waste time. As he landed a blow and successfully defeated the boss, he moved forward to the next, landing a strike to the dungeon boss. Once again, his face was all over the news. As he continued to clear multiple dungeons, he was labeled as a superhuman hunter, a ferocious monster. Lost its balance after receiving an attack from Toji. Toji stood before the fallen beast corpse as he marked his 5th dungeon run that week, surrounded by blazing red energy. Toji stood ready for the battle, holding their phone's news flash. As a rookie hunter was clearing the dungeon at an unusual speed, the men stared at their phones, shocked by the unknown hunter's identity. Yuji scrolled through his phone as he also wondered how fast Toji was. Toji greeted Yuji with a smile and asked for a dungeon. Toji stands calmly with a faint smile. Yugi greeted him back with a smile, while telling him that he had an offer to make. He cheerfully looked at him. As he urged Toji to take a rank advancement exam, Yuji explained that hunters have rank too. The higher the rank, the greater the rewards and the more difficult the dungeon to clear. He fixed his glasses as he told Toji that he could take the exam anytime. Toji gladly took the opportunity. The dungeon was in the middle of the park. They both fixed their gaze. As Yuji informed him that it was a D-rank dungeon, Yuji was wearing protective gear, while explaining that it doesn't have to be. Clear at once. He looked at him and reminded him that strength was all he needed. To see Toji was worried about Yuji going inside the dungeon. He asked if he was okay with the magic power, while Yuji prepared his headgear. Wearing the suit, he will be able to stay inside the dungeon for 2 hours straight. He then introduced 2 C-rank hunters, who would serve as his protection. The hunters moved forward and introduced themselves, in which Toji replied. Kira was delighted to meet him and asked Toji about his skills. Hashi assured him of Yuji's safety and told him to go all out. The 4 of them walked inside the dungeon without hesitation. They landed inside and started looking around. A clawed beast suddenly appeared from the shadows. With its mouth wide open, it leapt above Toji in a sudden, fierce motion. Toji fiercely activated his buff and welcomed the monster. He dashes forward with a knife and perfectly cuts the monster in half. The 3 of them were amazed as Toji landed perfectly on the ground. Toji grips his blade and scans the area. The monsters advanced quickly with weapons, and fury and silence fell as he looked at the approaching monsters. Yuji was surprised as 3 lizard men showed at once. Toji stood firm with his blade stained. He lunged ahead the 2 monsters as he was ready to strike them. Their limbs flew in every direction as Toji landed hard on the ground. He landed on one knee just as the lizard targeted him with an arrow. Toji's expression hardened while holding his blade. He strikes from below in a flash, his knife slicing a clean arc towards the monster. The lizard crashed to the ground as the knife landed on his head. Toji stepped on the lizard's corpse and pulled out his knife. He flipped his knife into the air and said it was a nice warm-up, while the 3 were still observing. The 3 onlookers stare in stunned silence. Kuro was stuttering as he mentioned that those monsters were on par with an E. Rank boss a calm smirk played on Toji's lips. Yuji was inwardly stunned by how Toji had been clearing the dungeon. His eyes widened as he realized it was Toji's speed and strength, and not his skills. The 3 were still standing in the back, while Toji's confidence radiated from him. The monsters roared as they slowly fell on the ground. The corpses of the slain monsters lay scattered across the ground, while Toji stood deeming it easy. Amazement washed over Kuro and Hashi's faces as they took in sight of Toji. Yuji stared in disbelief as questions ran through his mind. The dungeon suddenly began shaking and alerted the hunter. Panic was written on their faces as the dungeon continued shaking. The blue magic stones were emitting a purple energy. Then suddenly it became purple. The system issued a warning about the construction of a new dungeon. Toji's eyes widened as the impossible unfolded before him. The dungeon has fallen into ruin. Pillars started falling and trapping them inside. A towering statue covered in purple magic energy suddenly emerged. The four of them looked around unaware of what was happening. Toji clenched his teeth as he realized that the magic power inside was rising. His eyes grew in panic as he called on Yuji. Yuji was lying on the ground, unconscious. Yuji collapsed to the ground due to the increasing magic power inside. Toji rushed to his side and helped him get up. Yuji managed to speak through shallow breaths, warning him to retreat from the overwrite dungeon. The others gathered as Yuji explained. Only 9 of these had happened worldwide. Toji gritted his teeth in frustration. Undead monsters suddenly emerged from the ground, making them step back. Kuro was cursing under his breath as he unleashes a barrage of gunfire. The undead monsters absorb the gunfire unfazed. The undead lizard then slowly regenerates, regaining its form again. They stared in shock because the gun didn't work, while Hashi suggested using a skill. Hashi raised his hand and activated a skill. The undead monsters stood in confusion. Suddenly a serpent emerged from the ground. The serpents instantly attacked the undead monsters. The monsters writhed in pain as serpents coiled tightly around them. They were relieved for a moment. But undead monsters emerged from different parts of the dungeon. The monsters charged forward relentlessly and left them stunned. The looming monster descended from above as it caught them off guard. He looked up in horror and immediately told them to get out. The undead monster drops fast as everyone stumbles back in terror. Shadow tendrils burst out and seize the hunters as they scream in pain. Toji desperately called them while holding on to Yuji. Kuro screams in terror as the shadow engulfed him completely. The undead monster then looms menacingly over Toji. In the unconscious Yuji, the monster lets out a knowing grin. Toji clenched his jaw upon realizing that these are the monsters he defeated. This dungeon is Lizardman's grave. According to the system, the shadow monsters surrounded the statue as they hiss around. The system gave Toji a recommendation to clear the dungeon or escape. Toji glanced back, hoping to escape, but the exit was surrounded by monsters. Having no other choice, he laid Yuji to the ground. He activated his skill while telling Yuji to hold a little bit. He glared as he remembered his battle with Kuga and how he controlled his magic output. The undead monster growled and rushed forward to him. He stretched his hand. The monster halted in shock as Toji's hand sank deep into its chest. Toji fixed his eyes on the monster and told it to die, with a voice full of command. The monster thrashed in agony with power ripping through its chest. He glanced at the undead monsters. Drawing the light sword he obtained from the night, he stood tall and aimed the sword in front. As he activated its skill, Toji slashed the sword and unleashed a surge of golden energy that destroyed the undead creatures. The light slowly made the undead monsters deteriorate, leaving no trace behind. Toji stood in the middle. As he cleared most of the undead monsters, an unspoken alarm flickered in his eyes. Cracks spread across the lizardman statue as it began to break apart. The stone shattered and revealed a skeletal structure. Beneath the crumbling statue revealed a towering skeletal monster. Toji looked up as he realized it was the owner of the dungeon, and the system gives Toji a warning. It roared as a torrent of purple energy burst from its mouth. Toji prepared himself to dodge. He landed backward on one knee. Steadying himself, he glared ahead as red energy surged around him. He struck with blazing speed. As his sword clashed against the skeletal monster, the monster's bones snapped into pieces, but the bones instantly reformed. Toji landed with a piercing gaze, not knowing if it worked. The skeleton monster raises its sword to strike forward. The monster's attack landed at Toji's location, with force strong enough to crack the floor. A massive shockwave erupts in all directions. Toji hit the ground as the pillars started collapsing. The system warned the monster was feeding on the dungeon's energy, making him realize something. The monster grabbed the broken pillar, raising it above its head and threw it forward, aiming at unconscious Yuji. A deafening blast tore through the air. Toji slashed through the pillar to protect Yuji from harm. He glared at the monster, knowing it had realized his weakness. The skeletal monster shrieked in response. Toji looked down and asked the system about Yuji's condition. Yuji's face was tense even in sleep. Toji's face darkened, as the system warned to finish within 10 minutes for Yuji's sake. Toji faced the undead king and declared its death. His eyes locked with fury as he swore to crush the monster into pieces. The monster prepared its weapon, while Toji dashed forward to blow an attack. Rage surged in his gaze as blades struck with such force that it shattered the monster's weapon. In an instant power surge, as he struck again, his sword pierced through the monster's spine. Driven by resolve, he activated the sword skill. The monster let out a guttural growl in pain. Writhing from the impact, Toji drove the blade without mercy. The impact of the strike sent the monster crashing down. Toji summoned his Sword of the War hammer and aimed it forward. The monster's jaw clenched. Its tail arced through the air, threatening to crush the unconscious Yuji. Toji activated his skill and title. Toji raised his hammer while locking his eyes on the target and braced for the final strike. He crashed down with a surge of dark energy from his hammer, driving it into the monster's head. Rage distorts to the monster's cracked face. Amid the drifting debris, Yuji's body lies on the ground. Toji landed on the ground. As the system confirmed the defeat of the monster, he ran towards the unconscious Yuji. The battlefield blurs around him as he dashes towards the exit. Yuji slowly opened his eyes. With his soft gaze, he recognizes that the figure was Toji. Yuji stirred weakly and closed his eyes again. Toji rushed towards the exit for Yuji's sake. His face tensed and his eyes were filled with rage. He slashed through the monsters and kept moving forward, with his sword in hand and Yuji at his back. He hurried to the exit. He still charges forward with determination to reach the exit. Despite the monsters, the dungeon's exit was right before his eyes. He activated his skill mid-sprint, then leapt through the dungeon's exit. Toji and Yuji landed outside the dungeon, while the hunters were gathered around. Emergency responders were securing the place. Toji's face was relieved when he saw the backup outside. He ran towards the ambulance while carrying Yuji in his back. The ambulance departed as he watched it disappear into the distance. Marie uttered Toji's name firmly, and he froze in shock. A surge of emotion crossed his face as he recognized the person. Marie stared at him in silence. They stood face to face with Marie confronting him about the dungeon. Toji stuttered with nerves while telling her it was a dungeon. Overnight, her eyes narrowed after hearing that the dungeon's danger had changed. She then asked about the other hunters, which made Toji look down. Marie stares in intense silence, keeping their distance. Marie told him not to regret a thing and be thankful that he survived. Marie and two other hunters rushed toward the dungeon. Undead monsters emerged from the gate, preparing to strike. The two hunters were in panic as the monsters came out. Marie struck the approaching undead monster and shattered it into pieces. She shouted that normal dungeon rules don't apply to overwrite dungeons. Undead monsters bolted towards the association staff. Marie and Toji's jaws tightened as they looked at the monsters. The group of monsters were violently sliced midair, and Toji landed on one knee in front of the staff. Marie froze in shock at what she had witnessed. She walked toward Toji, praising him while telling him to rest first. She used her skill. She swung her sword forward, radiating immense blue energy and slicing through the undead monster. Toji stood in astonishment, and the hunters were amused by her speed. Memories of their past battles surfaced in Toji's mind as she used the same skill once again. She hurried forward with blinding speed. With a single sweeping strike, she tore through the horde of undead monsters. Her blade ripped the monsters apart instantly, and she landed gracefully, with unwavering poise. Toji noticed that Marie is using Odo to boost her defense and strength. Marie stood confidently amid the fading shadows of defeated undead monsters. She exuded unshakable strength as the energy coiled around her. Toji stared in disbelief upon witnessing how strong Maria are. Marie drew the attention of the distracted hunters and urged them to move forward. The three of them entered the dungeon at lightning speed. Toji and the staff stood in awe upon witnessing it. He sat silently at the bedside as he was waiting for Yuji to wake up. Yuji slowly opened his eyes. Toji's face brightened and called out his name. He stood with joy when he saw Yuji had completely awakened. Yuji's eyes widened when he realized something. Toji shut his eyes and looked down. Sadness and pain was visible on Yuji's eyes. As he mourned, Toji moved closer. As he told him that it was not his fault, Yuji asked about the dungeon situation. He then replied that Marie had taken over. Toji showed his phone and told him that it was finished. He scrolled through the news and saw that Marie stayed until the magic faded. Yuji looked serious and asked how they got out of the dungeon. Toji was caught off guard by his question. Yuji's lip parted, admitting that he saw something. He saw a figure in dark armor and added that it was the same monster as before. Toji's lips tightened as sweat ran down his cheek. Yuji looked at him and directly asked if he was number 101. Toji's face went blank. Yugi's sweat ran down his cheek as he asked if Toji is number 101. Toji looked down and clenched his teeth. He nervously admitted that he was indeed number 101. His face tensed as he recalled that day of the murder and Kuga's death. Yuji's face turned shocked, asking him why. Toji clenched his hands and said. Yuji eagerly asked him for details. He understood what happened, while Toji faced the ground. Toji's eyes went sad as he apologized. Yuji ran his hand through his hair and frowned in guilt. He looked at Toji and asked about his future plans. Toji's eyes showed, resolved to hide his identity and keep being a hunter for Mayu. Yuji lowered his gaze and stayed silent. He glanced at him and said that it's nice to keep it hidden, but it is dangerous for Toji. He will be subject to threat. Yuji stared at him and advised him to kill lest to stay safe, making Toji nod in agreement. Yuji stretched his muscles while sitting on the hospital bed. His confused gaze turned when he heard his name. Toji smiled softly and thanked him, and he smiled back in response. Yuji handed Toji a list of suitable dungeons for him. He smiled and promised to add more if he found another suitable one. Toji was heading out when a woman stopped him. The girl and her companion stared in awe. Asking if he was Toji, Toji was surprised but still confirmed it. The two of them were happy to know, and the girl showed her phone. Toji was confused as he looked through her phone. It was a blog about his rank promotion, which made him even more confused. The girl was smiling brightly as she praised Toji's work. The guy told him that he was really fast at clearing dungeons and even got promoted. The girl stepped forward and added that it takes 2 to 3 years for that to happen. The boy excitedly leaned in and asked for tips, which startled Toji. Toji smiled awkwardly as he was unsure of what to do. He finds himself surrounded by an eager crowd, asking for tips and advice. Toji panics internally as everyone mobbed him. Yuji noticed the crowd's commotion. The god of six fangs looked at his phone and asked what it was about. His men were kneeling with their eyes fixed on the ground. On his phone was the news of Toji's promotion. He then crushed it in his hand and turned it to pieces. The man clenches his teeth and glares with murderous intensity. His men didn't dare utter a word out of fear. The man leaned to his pet and asked about Kugo. While one of his men said he hadn't returned, he grabbed the bottle of wine, knowing the four fangs failed. He furiously smashed the wine bottle on his pet's head, causing it to growl in pain. He then lifted the broken bottle and with a fierce motion, he brutally pierced it deep into the wolf's body. The two men froze in dread as the threat loomed before them. He angrily ordered them to kill Toji immediately. His men bowed down and apologized in unison. The man stomped down with explosive rage and cracked the floor beneath. The servant froze in fear as deep cracks split the floor beside him. His mouth stretched open in a furious snarl and ordered the men to take all the 5 fangs. He commanded them to bring Toji's head, and the men instantly bowed down in fear, with intense rage and bulging eyes. He thought Toji was mocking him. The lava flowed to the ground, and Toji stood tall with swords in his hand. Toji looked around upon realizing that the D rank dungeon has different terrain from lower rank. He took a step forward, and suddenly a group of furious hellhounds emerged from the fire. Toji's face went alarmed by the appearance of hellhounds. The hellhound unleashes a raging inferno from its mouth. Targeting Toji, an explosion occurred when its attack hit the ground, while Toji was fortunate enough to dodge. The system notified the skill was activated. A pack of hellhounds moves forward. Toji then dashes quickly away from them. The hellhounds prowled in confusion atop the cliff, and Toji hid behind the towering rocks. He soared into the sky as the hounds looked up in stunned silence. He then ascended with unwavering grace and drew his blades midair. Blades struck down each hellhound, killing them instantly. Toji descended like a falling star with blades in his hands. His eyes locked in fury as he prepared to strike. The monsters' bodies turned to mince meat with a single blow. As Toji landed on the ground, he looked at the monster corpses and realized low-rank dungeon monsters were different. He extracted the Black Flame Wolf swords from the defeated hellhounds. He opened his inventory and stored only 5 of them. He then rushed forward using his skills. He landed before the towering door marking the boss room. He opened the door with his 2 hands. A large amount of lava welcomed him inside. Toji clenched his sword as his sweat dripped. Due to the searing heat of the lava pressing against him, the molten surface turns violently, as if something immense will be rising. Suddenly, a massive fiery arm emerged from the lava. Toji's eyes widened as he froze when a massive arm rose before him. He darts aside as the massive arm was about to crush him on the ground. A blinding burst of lava erupts as the monster emerges in full fury. Toji stared upward, realizing that as the dungeon level rises, the bosses grow stronger. The Shaitan's monstrous glare burns with rage. With his fierce eyes, Toji tightened his grip on the blade, already savoring the upcoming battle. The Shaitan opened its mouth and let out a growl, its eyes ablaze, while looking down at Toji and muscles tense for destruction. Hellbounds emerged from the lava and started attacking him. He summoned his wolf sword and positioned himself, as if welcoming the Hellbounds. He struck the sword to the ground, and 3 kobolds came out. The kobolds rushed towards the Hellbound and started attacking them, leaving the small fry monsters behind. He rushed towards the Shaitan. Energy crackled around the Shaitan as he let out a bone-shaking roar. The system gave him a warning and recommended him to evacuate. Toji halted mid-step with eyes wide in disbelief. The Shaitan raised its hand as lava resurfaced around, making Toji jump out of the ground. He was taken aback after realizing that he can control the lava. The Shaitan glared at him as he stepped on its gigantic arm. He activated his high-speed movement and darted forward. With glaring eyes, he landed in front of its face and prepared himself for an attack. The Shaitan raised its hand in fury to give him a punch. His eyes narrowed as he cussed in shock. The Shaitan's fist landed on him with such impact, breaking his sword into 2. He was falling as he looked at the broken wolf sword. The kobolds started to deteriorate slowly, leaving the Hellbounds free. The Hellbounds hurried forward. The moment Toji landed to the ground, he then summoned another magic wolf sword. The Shaitan raised its hand again, and the lava started falling on Toji's place. His eyes narrowed upon realizing that the Shaitan can use 2 moves at the same time. He evaded swiftly through the air as the massive lava lunged toward him. The hellhounds emerged from the lava and started attacking him. Before the monster could land a strike, he swung his sword in front of him. He unleashes a deadly barrage of precise strikes that pierce through the hellhounds, his eyes burning with focus as he descends. With unshaken intent, he soars above the battlefield with his blade drawn, as the Shaitan gazes up to follow his every move. With determination in his eyes, his blade plunges into the Shaitan's chest with unrelenting force. He backed down when his sword broke and did not even leave a scratch. Toji stands firm with blazing eyes as he summons the demonic sword of the Reptile King. The sword radiates a purple energy as he activates its skill. He burst forward engulfed in a brilliant explosion of purple energy. A surge of dread filled its eyes when Toji hit its chest. The Shaitan roared in pain as cracks spread across its chest, then submerged itself inside the flowing lava, leaving Toji behind. Toji's eyes filled with disbelief. He rose above as the lava began to scatter. He summoned and lifted the war hammer above. As he prepared for a decisive strike, he descends like a blazing comet, with his blade engulfed in radiant force. The lava splits open with unstoppable force, revealing the Shaitan inside. The Shaitan snarls, but fear cracks through rage. Toji glared as he mocked the Shaitan. Its eyes widened in horror and rage. Toji was in midair when the shaitan furiously threw a punch. Toji radiates a crimson fury energy as his blade gleamed with deadly purple light. He then recalled how Marie used auto technique and deemed it as magic power. He raised his sword as he was determined to land a powerful blow. His eyes glowed in fury. A purple energy came from his sword. As the shaitan's hand clawed at empty space, the shaitan collapsed as the purple energy tore through its stomach. The shaitan collapsed with a gaping hole in its stomach. Toji was still in midair as the shaitan's body crashed down, and its sheer weight crushed the hellbounds. He descended to the ground with a sword in his hand. He looked down inside. The system reported that a new aura has been detected inside the dungeon. He looked at the boss room's door while holding his sword. He deactivated his skill and stood before the door. Footsteps of unknown individuals marched forward. Toji stared directly as they ascended. Figures emerged from the gigantic door. The suited agents descended continuously. All guns turned toward him as he stood unfazed. His eyes stayed sharp despite the danger behind. The brooch on the man's suit glowed. He noticed that the rookie guy was now getting serious. A man stepped forward with a smug grin. As his menacing crew emerged behind him, the girl slightly told him that they needed Toji's head, while the old man kept silent. The leader looked at him arrogantly, while the other smirked and the old man just glared at him. Toji just looked at them in silence. He noticed a 5-fong tattoo on the man's arm. Toji clenched his fist, as the old man told him to not take it personally, because it's the boss's order. The old man raised his hand with a deathly glare. He ordered the others to kill him. Toji's sharp gaze pierced through them. The old man, with the other 5 Fangs members, pointed to Toji and told the men to kill him. Toji glanced on the other side, while the men were pointing their guns at him. Gunfire erupted from the front, as he instantly moved to dodge the bullets. The man in black gritted his teeth in disbelief. Toji vanished in one swift move, leaving all the men stunned. He appeared behind him and struck fast, piercing through the man's back. The other men looked back and were stunned by what they saw. He stood calm with his blade dripping as enemies watched over him. He mockingly gazed at them. The old man then glared at him. He ordered the men to continue firing, in which they obeyed. Toji disappeared in an instant, leaving only the wind. The men looked around, wondering where Toji's voice was coming from. He appeared at the man's back and greeted him, while holding his shoulder. The man cussed in disbelief. The others clenched their teeth and aimed at Toji. Toji struck swiftly while the men around him were fatally shot. The men grimaced in pain and confusion because of how fast he is. Few men stood frozen in shock, as others lay lifeless on the ground because of Toji. Toji's face went serious, ready to take down the others. The old man's face dimmed as he realized he had underestimated Toji. He then instructed the men to use their skills to fight against Toji. Each of them activated their ability and prepared for battle. Toji hurriedly moved forward and mocked them for being slow. With one swift move, he surged forward and decapitated all the remaining men, and blood was all over the place. Their heads were sent flying to the air. Toji stood firmly in the middle of the lying corpses. The 5 Fangs members were amused by what they had witnessed. The system updated his title and a new one appeared. Toji wiped off the stain on his face as he answered yes. The members stood tense and alert while the old man was confused. The system began searching and Toji earned the title of Headhunter. His neck-targeting attacks are now powerful, as Toji deemed it terrifying. He faced the 5 Fangs members with a cold stare and issued a quiet, deadly threat. He arrogantly told them that it is too late to beg, but he would listen to their sentiments. The old man smirked, but his eyes were filled with rage. The old man stood at the back, as Nikki and Zuka arrogantly moved forward. He was impressed by the energy of the two. Nikki and Zuka stood at each side, cornering Toji in the middle. Both of them showed a boastful grin. Toji's face went serious and waited for their attacks. They both struck at the same time, but Toji was fast enough to stop them before it landed. With a confident grin, he effortlessly deflects the chakram and the 10-hand weapon. Zuka's mouth displayed a smirk. His face twisted as he told Toji it'd be boring if he died easily. Toji then looked at him with confidence. Nikki caught his attention when she complained. She sneered as sand spilled from her weapon. A broad smile came from Nikki's mouth. She then dispersed the sand and broke Toji's knife, which made him step back. Nikki unleashes a flurry of powerful strikes with a wild grin, the sand engulfing the chakram as it goes forward. Toji twists midair and flips his body as he dodges the incoming blow. He met her gaze and told her she was like Kuga. Nikki was annoyed and yelled at him. She lunges forward fiercely as she prepares to blow an attack. An enormous cage made of sand cornered Toji in the middle. Nikki called out to Zuka, just as he activated his skill and prepared to launch an attack. Zuka raised his hand, and a flurry of gleaming swords materialized midair. A rain of swords filled the inside of the sand cage, all aimed directly at Toji. Nikki's eyes went sharp, and the glowing tip of the cage plunged downward in a deadly strike, making Toji clench his teeth. His lips parted as he looked above, deeming the situation bad. A surge of sharp-edged sand appeared. It whips around him and sliced through the air with deadly precision. He landed on the ground as he dodged the attacks, but a sharp-edged sand surged behind his back. He grabbed his knife and used it to block the sand that has been following him. The sand pierces through his knife, making Toji clench his teeth in shock. Nikki smirks confidently while crossing her arms. Toji blocked the piercing sand and asked the standing Zuka and Nikki if their abilities were rare. Nikki affirmed with a sly smile. She told him that they were former rank hunters. Toji was stunned upon hearing that they were hunters. He recalled seeing them on the news as high-ranking hunters, who went missing only to resurface as senior members of Rokugai. Toji smirked as things got a little more fun. With sharp eyes and a swift motion, he slashes through the piercing sand. Nikki's eyes widened as she gasped in disbelief at the sudden turn of events. Toji tossed his knife aside, crimson energy surging as his eyes glowed red, and a sly smirk tugged at his lips, challenging them to play. Nikki narrowed her eyes in irritation while Zuka grinned in excitement. He extended his hand with confidence, calling forth a deadly array of swords. Swords rained down like a lethal storm. Toji dashed across narrowly, evading the twirl of blades. Zuka grinned widely as he dared Toji to kill them. Zuka charged at Toji and swung his weapon, but Toji effortlessly kicked it aside. He then followed up by swiftly punching Toji straight to his face. Toji gritted his teeth as he retaliated and punched the side of his head. Zuka growled in pain as he cupped the side of his head, while Toji watched before him. Toji eyed him with satisfaction while clenching his fist. Zuka looked at him annoyed as he cupped his bleeding cheek with a sharp smile. Toji told him that killing him right away would be boring. Zuka was furious while cupping his cheek. He darted forward in rage and struck his weapon, but Toji effortlessly sidestepped the attack. Toji noticed that the temperature increased. Zuka's grin widened and madness flickered in his eyes. Flames emerged as his blades rushed forward. Toji twisted his body as he swiftly dodged the incoming blades. Zuka worded Nikki's name in desperation and rage. Nikki understood as she glared in fury. She lunged her chakra forward and the sand emerged. It surged straight toward Toji. It clamped tightly around his legs and locked him in place. Zuka's smirk widened as he directly pointed his blades towards the immobilized Toji. His lips parted slightly. Flames of crimson energy coiled around his legs. As he activated his skill, the chains of sand cracked apart under the pressure of his crimson aura. Their mouths were left wide open in confusion. Fiery red tendrils traced the path of Toji's swift movements as he dodged the rain of swords. A gigantic arm made of sand appeared on Nikki's hand as she raised her chakram. Toji noticed the magic stone in the distance. Deeming it perfect, he left Nikki aside as he swiftly darted on his side. The gigantic sand hand crashes down towards Toji as he jumps midair. Zuka shouted in fury, urging Nikki to do it. Nikki cursed under her breath in frustration. Toji launches into the air as the gigantic hand lands on the magic stones. A massive surge of blue energy erupted and engulfed the area. The old man covered his face with his arm as the blue energy swirled around him. The magic stone energy was poisonous. Zuka grins wickedly as he braces himself, while Nikki shields her face in alarm. Toji emerged above from the explosion, leaving the two of them stunned in silence. He arrogantly smiled as magic doesn't work on him. Horror spread across Zuka and Nikki's faces. They desperately activated their skill to get ready to attack him. Toji saw his highest hail of swords, and a piercing sand rushed towards his direction, born from the combined force of the two. Toji looked down as the crimson energy surged around his hand. He gripped the incoming sword midair while clenching his teeth. He tossed it around and held the handle. He dashed forward and swung his sword at their chest, landing on the ground after the counter-attack. Nikki's face was full of shock and confusion, while Zuka fitted his teeth in pain and disbelief. The old man glare sharpens as he clicks his tongue in frustration. Toji faced the others and told them that Zuka was still breathing and could be healed. The old man's face turned grim and asked about Toji's plan. Toji stood calmly and advised them to back off. The old man smiled at him. They passed through him and went directly to the defeated members. His face darkened and ordered the other two. Toji glared at them in silence. The man's expression sharpens with intent, while the other glances at him and tells him about Mew. Toji's eyes narrowed as he asked the other guy. They stared at him with twisted faces, saying, "You can go after him." A grin spread across the old man's face. Wanting to play with him, they stood arrogantly in front of Toji. He then spoke with calm finality, making the old man's face fall into confusion, engulfed in a surge of crimson power. A sinister grin formed as he stepped into his true form. Their confidence shattered as they realized that they underestimated the wrong person. His crimson power swirled around him and dominated the entire area. They watched in dread as they recognized him as numbers 101. He whispered an apology to him, "Because these guys can't stay." Vengeance ignited in his gaze, as he cannot let these villains coexist with them. His crimson power engulfed the area, and they stood frozen in dread as they recognized him. Number 101 panic crept onto the old man's face. Stunned that it was Toji, Toji's eyes burned with fury. The old man clenched his jaw. Bara took a step forward and decided to go first. He activated his skill and transformed into a beast. He burst into motion and charged straight at Toji. With unwavering intent, he relentlessly swung his claw. But Toji kept dodging every strike with ease. Toji stared at him intently, making him growl in rage. Bara roared and raised his fist for a crushing blow. Toji summoned his werewolf sword. Bara lunged with feral force, but Toji was quick enough to block it with his sword. The two men stare at them with shock and disbelief. Bara was furious upon knowing that Toji's strength is greater. Deeming it impossible, he raised his claws and darted toward Toji. His limb was sent flying, and he growled in pain when Toji struck him with his sword. He roared in agony as he stumbled back, clutching his severed arm in disbelief. Toji looked at him and said that his attacks were too wide. Casa called him as the Thunder Strike. He activated his skill, and the thunder struck down. The thunder engulfed Toji in blinding light as his silhouette stands. Casa points forward as blue lightning crackles around him. Toji's silhouette emerged from the smoke, leading Casa in disbelief. Unfazed Toji crouched behind his damaged sword and glared at him. The old man watched in amusement when Toji used the sword as a lightning rod. He took a step forward and activated his skill, leaving Toji puzzled. His eyes widened in shock as a fiery surge of energy struck his chest. A massive explosion erupts in a blinding flash. Flames swirling around the old man as his hand continues to command the blast. He arrogantly asked Toji if he took a liking to his bomb. Toji surfaced from the explosion and said it helped a little, which confused the old man. His eyes ablaze and his power is surging, telling the man that it is now his turn. As they witnessed the power of numbers 101, Toji summoned his sword and raised it forward. While activating its skill, the purple energy burst and swirled around his enemies, leaving them in pain. He glared at them furiously while they reel in disbelief. They surrounded Toji and activated their skills as he stood unfazed, surrounded by purple energy. Casa gritted his teeth in pain as the energy kept swirling. Bara then clenched his teeth due to the overwhelming power closing in. Despite the struggle, the old man raised his hand to attack him. He braces himself with fierce determination as the surge of yellow energy surrounds him. A massive explosion of fiery energy and blinding thunder erupts, consuming Toji's figure. They were both stunned as they looked at him. A massive crimson energy coils around Toji, while he mockingly gazes at them. The three of them froze in disbelief as Toji emerged unscathed from the swirling energy. Bara ran away in terror for his life, but Toji noticed him. Toji summoned his vicious sword and struck him. His foot was caught as he descended on the ground in horror. Toji then summoned his reptile king's sword and raised it above, with gleaming light. He drove his blade forward, and in one brutal motion, the magic energy tore Bara's head from his shoulder. The old man shouted in terror. Toji glared at the two remaining enemies. A trail of crimson energy was left behind as he dashed forward to Casa. Casa grinned wickedly despite his bruises, while Toji was gripping his collar. Toji lifted him by the collar, lightning crackling as Casa writhed in pain. Toji glared him furiously. Casa screamed in agony as crimson energy engulfed him, slowly taking his life away. Toji released Casa, who had turned into a skull, while the old man stepped back in horror. Toji threw his sword towards the old man. Toji noticed the dungeon's reward and realized it could collapse at any moment. He opened a chest and found a knife inside. He immediately turned around and hid the knife. He then raised his hand and started generating a sword out of Shaitan's corpse. Toji looked at his blazing 5-star sword and gripped it tightly. The old man was shocked by what he had witnessed. Toji moved forward and asked the man about the location of their boss. Despite the pain, the old man mockingly grinned at him. Toji thrust the sword into his shoulder and pierced his back. While he screamed, Toji activated the shot-in sword skill, and the magma surged toward the old man. The old man was terrified and told Toji that the boss was in Minato Ward. Toji then calmly asked him about the other location. The old man's face was sweating hard as he revealed the other locations. Toji stared ahead with a knowing look. The old man pleaded with him, but Toji glared with furious eyes. He pulled out the sword on the man's shoulder, making him wince in pain. The old man went into panic as the magma engulfed his legs. He shouted at Toji furiously in disbelief. Toji stood firmly as he watched the old man submerged in magma. He mockingly looked at the man. The old man reached out in vain as the magma fully consumed his body. Toji just gazes at him mercilessly. Tears formed in his eyes as the magma closed in, engulfed in flames. He outstretched his hand while Toji walked away from the scene. He glared with a ruthless intent by the thought of killing the Rokugai. The magma leaves only a scorched skull from the old man. Below is the ruins of the biggest shopping mall, which is actually a hideout for the Japanese-styled House of the Five Fangs. God the Servant was seen pouring liquor to the old man's cup. He was the Five Fangs God himself, leisurely enjoying a drink. He then felt the powerful shaking of his house, to which he speculated that his subordinates must be testing their skills again. The earthquake continued and even intensified, breaking the vases in his house. This alarmed the Five Fangs God as he stood up, thinking they were being raided. He picked up his iron club and went outside to check, only to see a silhouette of a man standing by the moonlight atop the hole of his hideout. It was Toji, clad in black suit, as he released his crimson aura. His men then came out of their hideout to check. Number 101 is there. The old man was delighted that Toji came to attack them, thinking he could claim a bounty from his head. Toji looked down on them. He never expected a Japanese-style house under the ruins of the shopping mall. The Five Fangs God was unleashing a powerful aura as he looked at him. Meanwhile, his men whipped out their anti-monster weapons to fight with him. First, he enveloped his weapon in crimson aura. As he activated the maximum output for his king-crushing skill, he struck down like a falling meteor, carrying with himself immense force as he approached. The shockwave alone from his descent was enough to make the Five Fang God flinch. he landed down cleanly. And warning messages about his decreasing magic popped up. He recalled his weapon and said it was enough for now. With just the process of descending, the 5 Fawn. God was surprised to see that all his subordinates are now dead. He then took off his clothes, wearing an evil smile as he prepared for the impending battle. Toji unleashed his crimson aura in response. Surprising the old man, he then bursted out laughing. Upon learning how powerful Toji really is, he enveloped himself in his powerful energy as he charged forward, prompting Toji to draw out his werewolf's magic sword. He was seen visibly struggling as he tried to block the 5 Fangs God's attack. He was even more surprised to see his weapon gradually breaking. On the other hand, the 5 Fangs God seems to be enjoying their battle as Toji continued to block the attack. He learned that the iron club was sucking away the magic from his body. Seeing that making contact with him is bad, he was prompted to back away. The 5 Fangs God extended his hands, smiling as he unleashed his powerful energy and activated his skill. Several jaws then appeared, biting through different parts of his body. He was surprised to see the 5 Fangs God's skill, remarking that it was really troublesome. The 5 Fangs God wasted no time and immediately swung his club against him. But the 5 Fangs God swatted him around like a fly. His tone was mocking as he asked him what was wrong. But to the old man's surprise, he stood up immediately and charged at him with his crimson energy. He activated his high-speed expert skill, his eyes burning with determination as he dashed in. He managed to connect his punch and landed it on the 5 Fangs God's stomach. It was so powerful that he was able to send the old man flying, but it wasn't enough to entirely take him down, as the 5 Fangs God was still smiling upon taking the hit. But to his surprise, he felt that Toji poured magic directly into his stomach. On the other side was Toji panting, as he wondered if what he did worked. Seeing that he was still smiling like that, he knew that nothing happened, even after getting hit by his punch. As he looked forward, he knew that he was definitely the boss for a reason. With this, he had no choice but to push himself to his limit, even if it means using all the magic swords he has. He then hurled all his goblins' magic swords towards the 5 Fangs God, who deflected all of them like it was nothing. He smiled as he finally figured out that his skill was drawing swords. From another space, Koji couldn't care less and continued attacking, only to find his sword broken. But he was not discouraged and still continued attacking. He attacked him even though he was just laughing at his face. He finally whipped out his black flame wolf's magic sword and activated the explosive flame manipulation skill, only to get his flames absorbed by the 5 Fangs God's iron club. He was surprised to see that it can also absorb the magic sword skills. It was the 5 Fangs God's turn to attack. He swung his iron club against him. He continued swinging while he evaded. But then he was surprised to see that he was cornered by his iron club, hitting him directly in the body and slamming his body to a wall. Behind him, the 5 Fangs God stood cockily, as he remarked on Toji running out of his sword stash. Meanwhile, he was seen weakly slumped to the wall. The 5 Fangs God raised his sword as he aimed to end things, already leaving Toji in desperation, as the finishing blow was about to be unleashed against him. The 5 Fangs God towered before Toji and gave him a mocking smile. Toji stared at him undisturbed. He lay motionless on the ground. The boss raised his weapon, declaring the end. Toji summoned his werewolf magic sword. He activated his buff and lunged forward with determination. He landed a powerful strike, slashing deep into the boss's side. The 5 Fangs God growled in rage. He then countered with skill. His jaw emerged and shattered Toji's sword. Toji cussed in frustration as he glanced at his broken sword. The god followed up an attack, smashing his weapon on Toji's back. Making him sneer in pain, Toji kneeled to the ground in so much pain. Thinking he broke a bone, he tried to stand still, despite the agony. The 5 Fangs God watched him stand as he deemed Toji being stubborn. With a smug look, he once again raised his hand for an attack. Several jaws darted towards Toji, biting every part of his body, making him cry in pain. The system showed up and gave him a warning to retreat immediately, as his magic was depleting. He looked down, covered in bruises. The god smiled arrogantly, as he mocked him for draining his magic power. With his head down, Toji told him that it is indeed like that because he gave it to him. The Five Fangs God's eye went confused. Suddenly a surge of dark and crimson energy swirled around him. He landed on one knee and gushed out of blood. He looked at him with a threat in his eyes. While Toji looked him in the eye, he gritted his teeth in rage. Suddenly he froze when brown patches appeared on his body. Toji punched his stomach to plant his magic power inside him, sacrificing his every sword. As the magic accumulated, the Five Fangs God laughed in amusement. He then summoned a massive jaw directed towards Toji. The massive jaw crashed down to devour him. The Five Fangs God grinned confidently and mocked the injured Toji. Between the massive jaws, Toji's eyes glowed as crimson energy swirled around him. He was ignited in rage as he tore the massive jaw apart. Toji stood tall and said his magic had invaded his body, making him step back in disbelief. The Five Fangs God went berserk, releasing twin blows that Toji dodged. By moving back, he launches a devastating blow of his weapon downward, aiming to smash Toji. Toji's expression darkened while the god's blow landed to the ground. The magic power planted inside him finally detonates, erupting a violent burst across his body. Toji stood before the fallen god. As he deemed the battle of speed, the Five Fangs God crawled and gritted in disbelief. Toji stopped him from going somewhere by piercing his sword through his leg. The Five Fangs God gazed at him as he admitted his defeat. He pleaded Toji to let him live. By granting his wish, Toji pulled out his sword from the god's leg and drove his sword into the god's other leg, making him let out an agonizing scream. He drove the sword deeper as it emitted a surge of purple energy. The god growled even louder in pain. Toji's face darkened in rage as he wished for the god's death. The god's eyes narrowed in disbelief, deeming him insane. Toji glared down with his eyes blazing red and filled with rage. While the god gritted his teeth, Toji pulled out his sword to the crawling god, not wanting him to die easily. A pack of wolves suddenly appeared in front of the god. His face turned pale in terror. The wolves were drooling with bloodlust as they locked their eyes on their prey. Toji looked at them and ordered them to eat up, leaving the god's eyes wide open. The wolves started ripping and shredding his flesh with ruthless hunger, while Toji turned his back coldly and moved forward. Toji looked above the night sky as he finally got his revenge on Rokugai. He then organized the items he got from the fight. His gaze landed on the club, classifying it as more than a rank item. The twin sword's bronze mirror and the dagger were all rare items. The system notified him that all items with magic power can be stored. Within a word, the items disappeared in front of Toji. The system then offered him a new title, which he accepted. He now obtained the title of the killer. A loud noise caught his attention as he looked above. He leapt high above to escape and saw that those were the backup from other branches, with energy swirling around him. He darted swiftly, determined to kill them all. Explosions were heard at the third Hakyo G dungeon ruins. A bald man was seen slamming to the wall as the massacre went on. One of the bald men was seen desperately hiding, with dread etched on his face. He was crying as he tried so hard to not make any noise, wondering why Toji was there. The sound of the beating stopped as he continued hiding. He leaned sideways and peeked to check if he was gone. Dread once again crept through his face as he looked up, sweating bullets and crying. Toji was there like a demon looking down on him. He then grabbed his face and was followed by a scream of agony and blood splashes. Koji went on his way, walking upstairs. He then opened the door abruptly, and he was greeted by the gruesome sight of men taking advantage of young women. On the floor lying were clothless young women, crying as they tried to cover their bodies. One of the men was flustered and questioned his identity. This sight enraged Toji to the extreme. Their headless bodies fell in front of the girls, who screamed in fright. They looked at him with terror on their faces, while he told them that they were free now. He added that they can now do whatever they want, to which the girls looked at him with a hint of confusion on their faces. His brows furrowed in frustration and rage, thinking that me might have ended up there too. He remembered how his sister cheerfully greeted him. Good morning. He would greet her back while she invites him to eat together. She would serve their food and check up on her. A news flash was heard as he began eating. It was a report about the headquarters of Rokugai being raided by number 101. He quickly finished his meal and expressed his gratitude. He then put on his jacket. While Mei was surprised that he was heading out already, they then bade each other farewell as he continued on his way. She sighed. Her brother is such a workaholic. Toji is now talking to the high class anti-monster rifles of the goons from the 3rd Akabane dungeon ruins, but their weapons don't even affect him. As he enveloped himself in his crimson aura, his face was brimming with determination to wipe out the remaining 3 branches of the rookie guy. Within the day, the men were starting to get nervous as they saw their weapons not affecting him. Yamato then ordered for their bigger guns to be brought out, to which one of the goons complied. They are now seen wielding bazookas, pointing them towards him. They then fired at curling the rockets towards him. Toji activated the high-speed expert title in response, allowing him to dodge the projectiles and cut down the enemies. In an instant, he stood like a protagonist of an action movie, turning his back on the explosion he just created. Yamato and the remaining men were surprised to see that even their bigger guns did nothing. On the contrary, Toji was just getting started. As he activated his killer title, he unleashed an overwhelming amount of crimson aura, suffocating the enemy troops. But one of the men was still conscious. He then pressed it, hoping to unleash the beast that will kill Toji. A cage then opened from behind. Toji spitting the silhouette of a monster looking down on him, eyes glowing as it bared its fangs at the sight of him. It then let out a loud roar as it raised its limbs to stomp him. But Toji was unfazed and enveloped his fist in crimson energy. In response, he then punched, firing off the crimson energy towards the beast. The beast was directly hit by his crimson energy in the stomach. Toji clenched his fist, noticing that his strength had increased from leveling up. The massive beast was unfazed, however, and roared at him, to which he activated his white light magic sword in response. He then swung it down effortlessly, cutting through the beast's body like a hot knife on butter. He stood in the middle of the beast's sliced body as they fell apart. He then turned his back and told the system to create a magic sword and store it. He whipped out his hammer. He could still feel a presence there. He swung his hammer and destroyed the wall, which Toji found confusing. As he looked at them, they were polite as they spoke, declaring that the remaining members of the Rokugai pledged their loyalty to him, but knowing that they attacked him earlier, he couldn't bring himself to believe them. The men said it was just Yamato's decision alone, and they all agreed to surrender to him. Upon hearing that he could collect tributes from them, he was greatly enraged. He brought forth his hammer and asked them about their victims, who said the same things. They then desperately promised that they would change in the future and wash their hands off of killing. He looked really confused with what to do, as there's no guarantee that they won't betray him. The system then recommended that he use the whip of subjugation, adding that its functions aren't limited to monsters and can be used on humans too. He then brought it out and told the men to not move. He slapped one of them on the face with his whip. Slapping sounds were then continuously heard as he whipped every one of them. They were utterly confused, wondering what that was for. Little did they know they had been leashed by the mark of subjugation. The mark eventually vanished, but it was still in effect nevertheless. He gave his strict orders to never betray him and bring all the remaining members to him within the day. Everyone agreed to fulfilling his orders in unison. They then walked down to comply, while Toji was left with the thought of controlling everyone. With his whip, his eyes were filled with determination to finally end things with Rokugai.